The 2026 Mini JCW Convertible starts at $44,000, and for that money you get single piston front brake calipers where the old one had 4, and an open diff where a limited slip should be. On paper, this one went backwards. Behind the wheel, nothing feels missing. So either Mini cut costs and got away with it, or Mini worked out something about road cars that a spec sheet can't. And the answer is in what the car does when you ask it to do something difficult.
$280 pounds of torque shows up early and stays there, and in a lot of ways it turns that throttle into a switch rather than a measured request from your right foot. Squeeze it out of a second gear corner and it just pulls. You're never waiting for that turbo to spool up. And the thing is, it pulls all the way to redline, but if you're on the outside, you'd never think that. And I know the cynics will say, 228 horsepower in 2026, that sounds like a warm hatch. But when you're behind the wheel, you think it has more, and that's because all of that torque arrives the instant you ask for it. Now, some of what you hear is the engine, and some of it's synthesized through the Harman Kardon sound system. Mini's not subtle about it either. Every once in a while you lift off the throttle, maybe under braking, and those rear speakers make some burble that no one under 12 mistakes for anything related to actual combustion. Drop the top like I've been doing the entire time, and this whole trick has nowhere to hide because it continues and the speakers are firing into the open air. And still, your ears and maybe even the local wildlife can tell exactly where those sounds are coming from. With this car, Mini ships 7 experiences. Go-kart, which we're in now, sharpens the throttle, holds gears longer, and adds a little heft to the steering. Green changes how the car coasts. The other 5 are lighting and a font change sold to you with the same straight face. One of the troubles I have with this car is that this 7-speed dual clutch is smooth to a fault. Ask for a downshift at the wrong moment and it actually waits until the moment is right so it doesn't upset the car, which is very thoughtful of the car and occasionally not exactly what you wanted. And in go-kart experience, despite it sharpening the throttle and adding some weight to the steering, it does nothing to the gear change whatsoever. Still just as smooth as all the other modes. There's no violence in any of it, and a decade ago, a transmission this polished would have been exciting. Now it's the only choice, and polish is what you get. Yes, this is a JCW. There is no limited slip diff in the front. There wasn't in the previous generation either. And Mini's been dealing with that through software. Mini's been doing this for about a decade, and with 280 pounds of torque trying to get down through that front axle, they should have found the limitations of software by now. It's the inside front brake that's doing the work on corner exit, and it's so refined that you can't tell when it's actually engaged. On a tight second gear corner, power goes down so smoothly, you don't even feel a tug at the wheel. Subscribers get the next episode when it goes live. Everybody else leaves it to the algorithm. If you'd like to see when our next episode hits YouTube, that's what the subscribe button does. Turn-in's immediate, and it's one of those core Mini characteristic that has survived the decades. What comes back through the steering wheel is maybe a little less convincing. And as you're hustling this through a corner, the weight builds through the steering wheel, but it's the weight that's decided by the software, not what's actually happening at the front tires. It's strong on center, solid as a rock on the highway, so a long-distance trip is never any work. You steer this car with your eyes, you feel what's going on with the chassis through the seat, and ultimately your hands are just along for the ride as passengers. This is a JCW, so I have to bring this up. Single piston front calipers, where the previous gen ran 4 piston front calipers. Rotor size didn't change, 335 millimeters in diameter. Swept area didn't change either. What changed is how the pads get squeezed, and on paper that seems like a downgrade, but the brake pedal doesn't agree. Initial pedal effort is a little light for a performance-oriented Mini, and it took my brain about 10 minutes to recalibrate. But once I got a hold of this brake pedal, feel, control, modulation are all excellent. Braking is very strong, and communication from the pedal is very clear. Trail brake this into a corner, and you can control the attitude of this thing with the precision of something that wears a John Cooper Works badge on the outside. Somehow, Mini's ensured the performance of this braking system survives the change to the different mechanicals. Even under full ABS, this thing is rock solid, and that's the beauty of driving a small car. It changes direction in any direction quickly, even under maximum braking. One of the highlights of this car over the hardtop, yes, this has lost the rigidity of the hardtop. It's gained 100 pounds over the hardtop, but there is very little discernible cowl shake, if at all, from this whole setup. This chassis feels remarkably rigid, and they've clearly put a lot of work into the engineering. Even over the worst of Toronto's roads, there's no cowl shake, there's no rattle from anything that's convertible related in here. It is as rock solid as the hardtop, with the bonus of being able to take off the roof. I don't know if the adaptive dampers were recalibrated for this specific task, but in any case, they do an excellent job here. The body and wheel control is just as excellent as it is in the hardtop, and does a decent job of keeping some of the worst of Toronto's roads away from the cabin. If you'd like to support the channel beyond just watching, the link to the merch store is here. Your support there means more time for us to produce episodes like this, and a little less time worrying about industry access. No pressure, just an option. When it comes to ride quality, the name is firm, and this Mini doesn't apologize for it. On decent pavement, the dampers are their happiest. This thing will hit a bump and then immediately settle. But drive this over some of our worst road surfaces, and nearly everything from the road is transmitted into the cabin. The 17s with their 45 series sidewalls should do a little better job of absorbing some of those road imperfections, but that's not the case. And even though we have adaptive dampers here, there's no setting that you can use to really take that edge off. Those settings are tied to the experiences, which is basically go-kart and everything else. These seats are firm in the traditional German sense, which means they're hard for the first 20 minutes and then perfect forever after. With these JCW seats, you sit more in them than on them, and the difference shows up the first time you've got this loaded with some serious G's mid-corner. Forward visibility is just as excellent as in the coupe, and nothing about your ability to identify the apex is compromised. Behind you, that's a different story. With the roof up, you've got wonderful visibility through the rear view mirror. With it down, the roof actually stacks on that rear deck, and your visibility is a bit compromised. You lose roughly the lower third of the view out of the rear view mirror, but in reality, what's behind you is not important. Regardless, this seating position, my driver interface to this JCW Convertible is absolutely spot on. The seat adjusts properly, the steering column adjusts properly, and I have a very effective seating position here as the driver. This circular screen is interesting when you roll into the dealership or anytime you have somebody new in your Mini. However, there are some compromises with it, and one of them is that the climate controls live in this thing. Even in cars where the climate controls are built into the screen, your hand has a place to rest when you're adjusting the temperature or any part of the climate system. Here, there's really no place for your hands or finger to rest. Sometimes making the right climate adjustment when you're on the move is a bit like target practice when you're riding a horse. Now, I've been caught out several times with the top down and the music up. If I leave my turn signal indicator on, I can't hear the chime coming from the speakers, and without the turn signal indicator in the heads-up display, I'm running around like I'm driving Miss Daisy. The heads-up display does rescue the system because the essential information, other than the turn signal indicator, is displayed here, and it absolutely is brilliant. Wearing polarized sunglasses right now, and I can see everything on that heads-up display screen perfectly. This upholstery is called Veskin, and I think it's a word that Mini made up so no one has to use the term synthetic leather. Truth is, the material is very, very good, but the name sounds like something you'd take twice daily with food. The interior finishing of all modern Minis is one of the highlights of the experience in the cabin. There's knitted fabric across the dash and across the upper part of the doors. Very premium. One trick they do is there are LEDs that display behind this knitted fabric, and it's a wonderful experience at night or in low light conditions. There are some hard plastics in the cabin, but they live far below your sight lines. And especially at night, this cabin comes off as much more expensive as a Civic Type R, an Integra Type S, or even the Golf R. It's a completely different experience. Whether that's what you wanted out of your JCW is a different conversation, and nobody who sits in here is thinking about price. Power seats are an option. I think they cost $1,250. Think about that for a second. This interior is small enough that you can essentially adjust the passenger seat from the driver's seat without even leaning. For a convertible, there's a reasonable amount of trunk space, but it's not the amount of space, it's the shape that's the problem. The opening's effectively a slot, so I didn't try it, but I think putting a second carry-on in that trunk may be optimistic. For a two-person road trip and you're prudent about the amount of luggage you're going to carry, this would be wonderful on a long road trip. Just recognize that some of the luggage or other things you're carrying are eventually going to make their way to the back seat. There's actually a timer in the screen that tells you how many hours you've spent driving with the top down. That turns a lifestyle choice into a scoreboard and falling behind into a moral failing. If this episode gave you more information than a brochure or a press release, hit like. It tells YouTube to share this episode with other people like you interested in an episode like this. Takes just a second.
That's what the JCW Convertible told me after a week behind the wheel. Here's what some owners have to say, and I say some because forums are thin right now because barely anyone has one. We'll start with the auto stop start because owners have. It rearms itself every time you start the car. There are 3 ways to kill it: go-kart, sport on the selector, or a toggle buried in the menu. Owners landed on go-kart. So the people who own these are driving around permanently in the performance setting to keep the engine from shutting itself off at red lights. Mini built a performance mode and owners repurposed it as an off switch. On ride quality, that's where owner reports contradict one another. And the reason is rubber. The ones calling it punishing are on run flats. The ones calling it fine are not. Make sure you know that before signing the contract because the tire does more for ride quality than the dampers do. Some owners are saying that CarPlay drops on some of these, and for all of these new Minis that I've driven, CarPlay has never dropped for me. The fix owners landed on is deleting the pairing from the phone and the car, both of them actually, before it will reconnect properly. That's all from JCW owners. What hasn't turned up is any feedback on the roof, buffeting its speed, or how that roof holds up after multiple winters, and we're not quite there yet. If you own one of these or have some quality seat time behind the wheel of one of these, let me know in the comments what I got right and what I got wrong, because real-world owner experiences are much more valuable than anything I can learn in a week-long press loan, and I always read those comments. After a week of asking the JCW Convertible to do difficult things, I couldn't find the hole in where the parts used to be. Mini took 3 pistons out of every front caliper on a car that cost $44,000 and left the front differential open in the way it always was. And after asking those repeated difficult questions in the corners, the hole's not under the brakes and it's certainly not under the front end because it has no trouble putting power down. Somebody spent some money on the parts we don't see, and then somebody spent some time carefully tuning it. So who buys this? It's for someone who wants the roof open on the way to work, not once a summer, and you have somewhere else to put the groceries. You're also going to drive it rather than posing in it, because everything really good in this car shows up above 7/10 and stays hidden below it. Modern Minis are about fun, and don't let regular people spoil the fun. Regular people who've never owned a convertible will tell you the roof stays up 11 months of the year. People who own one stop counting, which is perhaps what the timer on the screen is for.
So one thing that this driving experience reminds me about, and that it's very easy to ruin a road car by making it too much of a race car. When it comes to race cars, we strip out all of the electronics because we want the front and rear axles raw. We want to know exactly what's going on limit. The lack of these road car electronic systems on the track pays for itself in terms of consistent lap time. Road cars keep that light layer because nobody wants to pay for it on a Tuesday morning. Mini picked the road car end of that equation, and somehow they've figured out to make a car that's just as rewarding to drive. If an open air motoring experience matters to you, then this is the car. If it doesn't, the hardtop starts at 38.9 and you lose nothing but the sky. That's the JCW Convertible. Subscribe if you want to see more episodes like this. Don't if you don't. Comments are open if you disagree. And if you'd like to help fund more of these, the link to the merch store is here. See you on the next one.